Hi, and welcome to this podcast with me, Geeta Joshi. I'm a curator and art dealer and the organiser for Camberwell Arts Open Studios. And I'm here today with Jehane. Welcome, Jehane.
Hi, Geeta.
I'm so pleased to have you on the show today, and we're going to be talking about licensing. So, Jehane, you work as a designer and an art consultant. Tell us a bit more about the consultancy side of your work.
Well, the consultancy side of my work, Geeta, has been a natural development from the many years that I've worked as a designer and as an artist's agent. I've set up my own company and represented artists for many years, licensing their work, and I'm very passionate about sharing that expertise, really. And so it's been a very natural progression to do artist consultancy, which really focuses on a variety of things. Firstly, on portfolio reviews, and secondly, on kind of demystifying some of the questions about the licensing process as well.
Yeah, that does seem a bit of a dark art sometimes. So what sort of artists are most suitable to have their artwork licensed? Is it really for illustrators and surface designers, or can it be more, fine artists doing original paintings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's completely open, but it tends to be that the different agents have a specialism. So you might have an agency who are more looking at illustrators and less at surface pattern, and vice versa, and then others who will incorporate lots of different medium. But certainly you could be a ceramicist and do amazing patterns or drawings on your pots. You can still license the image. You could be a jeweler or an enamelist. You could be, an animator, or obviously a singer or writer. If you're creating work visually, you need a high resolution image so that your imagery can be produced at a high quality, but there's not really a restriction in terms of your media.
Amazing. Hadn't really thought of that with jewellery and things, but makes sense now you say it. So how would that work for somebody starting out? Should they have a body of work already, or is that work commissioned by whoever's buying it?
Yeah, the interesting thing, Geeta, is that there's often not a simple answer to the questions, because licensing is a very layered industry, and there are a whole variety of ways that people approach it. But if you were starting out, you wouldn't ideally need a product. You'd need an example of the images that you create. It would preferably show a range of your style. If you were going to an illustration agent that solely dealt with commissioned work, it would really be as a style guide, and clients would look at the work and commission from it. If you were working with an agent that also shows existing imagery, which they can just license as it is, as well as commissioned work, then yes, naturally, you would need a body of work with which that can be done.
Okay. And what are the typical products that artwork would be reproduced on? Because I've seen it. One of my artists that I work with at the gallery has a deal with a card company. So he has his original oil paintings on cards, but other than that, and calendars, anything else?
It seems to split into two quite general areas. On the one hand, it might be editorial and book covers and advertising and packaging, that kind of thing. Or it might be greeting cards, calendars, tins, textiles, jigsaw puzzles, anything that you can put an image on. Essentially, there aren't really any limits. Even candles, a real wide variety of product.
So what is the process? So an artist would find an agent that would represent them, and then the agent would match them, or the product manufacturer?
Yes, I think ideally, again, there are two ways. An artist can represent themselves and contact clients directly. They'd need to have a little bit of information about the licensing process in order to do that, so that they would feel a bit more confident and a bit more informed about what might then construe as part of that process. But and they would themselves naturally match their work with the clients that they think they'd be suited for. And likewise, that's what ideally an agent with which you would have a good relationship would also do that for you. They hopefully wouldn't show your work to a market for which the work just isn't suitable. So that's all part of the agent's job, to get to know what really is important and of interest to the artists, but also what's of interest and importance to the client, and can those things come together And it's often not just about what the artwork looks like. It might be whether the artist is very busy doing other things, so therefore can't necessarily turn something around quickly. It's a very layered, there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be found out about how an artist and a client might work, as well as whether or not there's a visual match.
Okay. And then how about in terms of, so when there is a deal that somebody's going to have their artwork put on, let's say, a calendar or a tin, do you usually find there's a kind of quite a lot of back and forth, or?
Yeah, there can be. It really depends on the project. So yeah, again, it can work in lots of different ways. It really does depend. But it's interesting. I put a call out earlier on my Instagram stories as to what questions would people like to ask, and that we were doing the podcast today, and one of the questions which did come back was what you've just asked about which products do the images get put onto. So that's great that you've asked that question. And the second one was talking about the process of the actual payment, which I'm sure is something that you wanted to ask me about as well.
So now you've raised it, talk to us about the payment process. Is that a flat fee or is that recurring? How does that work?
So yeah, the question was really how do fees versus royalties, when is it better to choose flat fees over royalties and vice versa? So yeah, it tends to be either a flat fee, which is a one-off payment, and that doesn't necessarily, you wouldn't then get anything subsequently, even if the design were very successful. And obviously the design could not do very well, in which case the client has taken a little bit more risk and paid up front. Or royalties, whereby in theory the artist can benefit by the success of the design by receiving less money up front, and receiving a percentage of the trade price for which every time that item is sold, and that varies depending on the product area and the client and the territory that it's sold in. So there's lots of different parameters, but generally a flat fee is a better thing to choose if a client is only using one or two images, and generally a royalty would be recommended if they're really kind of investing in using a lot of images and creating a range. That would be my sort of basic distinction really between the two.
And also, like, how does that work with a company that wants to, use the designs? Do you find that they're quite often seasonal rather than, they're going to be using them for 5 years? It might just be like 2018, I don't know, summer bedding or something. Or
Yeah.
do you find they have much longer term relationships?
Again, it varies. Christmas designs, for example, can be much around for a much shorter time. But I've worked with companies who have still got the same elephant design in their collection that they had 25 years ago. So it is very variable, but often customers will look specifically for a range which is spring, summer in its colours, or likewise autumn, winter, so that they can bring those products into the shops at those times of year. But usually it would be sold really for more than one season, because there's a lot of investment of the company's time and obviously their financial investment. So ideally it's best if it's in the shops for longer, so that they can maximise on their efforts.
And in terms of lead time then, because you just mentioned seasons as well. So where are we? February 2018. What season would they be looking to buy now?
So I'm already selling work for, Christmas 2018 is finished already. So the product I'm up in Birmingham today for the Spring Fair, which is the biggest trade fair in Europe for all sorts of different products, and companies will be selling work for Christmas, for this Christmas already. So we're in February, and that's all. The product's already sitting on the shelves at the trade fairs, ready to be ordered. So we're now selling for 2019.
For spring. So in terms of that then, when did that start? Because obviously if you're at the trade fair now, those stands have got merch on there, right? So they're ready to take orders from retailers. So when would those designs or mock-ups have been created?
Well, some of them, it will probably depend on where they're manufacturing it. If they're making if it's being manufactured in the UK, some things may have gone to print last week at the last minute, Ideally, they would have been finalising everything September, October time. And if everything, or if a collection is produced in China, for example, they would need a much longer lead time of, usually it's a minimum of 3 months, for them to get the product samples back. So some companies do both.
So thinking about, again, just the trade fair again, like obviously that is one of the places they also test the popularity of, these designs that they're spending, money on, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that they also might actually decide not to go ahead and produce something?
Well, with a lot of this, I think that's a very good question. A lot of the product there's already been a commitment to the number of units that they've manufactured.
Right.
So there may well be items of which they've got 3,000 things. They've got 3,000 items sitting in the warehouse. But certainly, again, it's back to the manufacturing process. For certain things that are made within the UK that they haven't needed to have made that investment, they may well be showing a small range to get a sense of what the interest is, and that might then dictate how they move forward with it. But generally, it's a product that they've committed to.
So they're doing the various trade fairs, because we had Top Drawer a couple of weeks back, right? So they're doing the circuit. Okay. And in terms of just something else that came up around manufacturing, how much input, if any, would the artist have about? So we've, say the artist has agreed to have their design put on a biscuit tin, and if they don't like it, how much say do they have on that? Is that the agent's role? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I think this goes right back to the beginning, which is that really, if an agent, or certainly how I work, I will find out at the beginning how an artist likes to work and how important is it to them that they have final approval. Obviously, I personally would always advocate that the artist does have approval, but it's not always possible. And it's important to know whether that's an absolute given and a deal breaker for the artist. And if it is, then there would be certain projects that you might not proceed with on that basis. For example, a company might be happy to send digital PDFs for approval, but not necessarily an actual 3-dimensional object by the post, because it all adds to costs. So, having that understanding of what the artist's preference is really important.
Oh, great. So that's all sort of decided up front, right? What do you, in your experience, have been, say, the common pitfalls for beginners or people, doing their first or second licensing deal?
I think one of the classics is selling copyright, selling full copyright. Copyright is an automatic ownership of the reproduction rights of the image, which an artist has automatically, and they have that for their whole life, and for 70 years after their death, the family estate has that copyright. And it's very common for artists at the beginning to naturally be really keen to have their work published, and to sell full copyright, which means that they can't then sell the reproduction rights for more than one product. So licensing really isn't an option. The sort of the whole construct of licensing is that in theory you will be able to loan the reproduction rights for a single image for different applications to different companies over your lifetime, thereby increasing the income from that individual image. And if you sell full copyright, you're kind of waving goodbye to that opportunity.
I see. So, talking about then licensing contracts. I mean, I know all contracts are so variable, and there are many, types. But is an ideal contract one where it's, you know, a single image on, you've agreed the surface that it's going to appear on, and then is there a time frame on how long they can use that for?
I've issued licenses just for a month, and I've issued them for in perpetuity, which is, you know, on an ongoing basis forever. So the time span is always variable, but yes, it should, in basic terms, it should identify the name of the image with a reference code. It should identify the copyright of the artist and their name. It should identify the product, for how long the contract is, you know, the duration of the term of the agreement.
And does that, sorry, just on that, does that mean that they can manufacture the product, let's say it's a 2-year time frame there, they can manufacture any for those 2 years, but if they've still got left stock in year 3, then they're obviously entitled to sell that?
Well, it depends. That's called a sellout period. And that varies again depending on the company. So that would be something to look for in the contract. Those are the kinds of things that, you know, are quite difficult to remember. But yes, in theory, most companies would have a sellout of 6 months or something like that after the 2 years was up, so to speak.
Using again an example, if somebody were to license their image to be used on that biscuit tin, could they, does that company that bought that license have exclusivity for that surface, or could they sell that same image to another biscuit tin company?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Gita. That would also be identified within the agreement. Some images it's not possible to have an exclusive on because they're images for which high resolution files exist in more than one place. So it's basically not possible to do an exclusive. So that would, for example, apply to an image of Van Gogh's sunflowers, which if you go and look in lots of different image libraries, you'll see it pop up again and again, because there have been different photographs taken of that sunflower painting at auction, for example. So there are lots of different photographers all over the world that have taken a photograph of Van Gogh's sunflowers. And obviously it's the high resolution of the photograph that's actually used. So there's more than one copy of those in the world. So that's a classic. It could only be licensed non-exclusively. But if it's a contemporary artist or it's an image within a collection that hasn't had that kind of thing happening to it, then you would be able to choose whether or not you're licensing it exclusively or non-exclusively. So people tend to want something on an exclusive basis, obviously.
Yeah. And we've heard this term, a buyout. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, thanks, Gita. A buyout is when the company is essentially buying all of the rights to an image so that they can use it for whatever they want to use it for. It's often used when a client commissions something because they have, in their mind, they also have some intellectual property rights in that image because they've thought of the concept. So a buyout will often be that you therefore afterwards can't license it for other things.
Ever, or for a set time?
No, it's usually that's usually sort of a slightly different thing.
And how about if an artist has licensed an image and then they're going to be doing, say, open studios, can they still sell, if it's a print, can they still sell editions of that? Or, if they've put that design on a mug, can they still sell that directly?
Yes, it's usually a separate, completely separate thing. And artists, in compared to the companies, they would be selling them in smaller quantities. So even if it were the same kind of product, it would usually be absolutely fine. But yes, absolutely. An artist can sell their original artwork even if they've licensed that original as a mug or a print. They're two separate things.
Brilliant. So where can people find out more about this? And do you want to give us the link to your website and things as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I do a session which is an introduction to licensing, which kind of goes through a lot of this stuff and gives people a little bit more time to ask, go into more detail. So my website is jehane.com, which is JEHANE.com. And there's a link on there about my consultancy, and people can just get in touch and I can send them some more details if they're interested.
And I'll put that in the show notes as well. And what's your Twitter and Insta handles?
I think they're both the same, helpfully. I've just changed them. They're Jehane_Limited. I've just set up a new company, Jehane Limited, so I'm trying to keep everything consistent.
Excellent. Thanks very much for all your help.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Geeta.
Thank you.